This is Columbus Concerns, a public affairs presentation of North American Broadcasting. Here's your host, Mark News.
Good morning, and thanks so much for joining us today. Very few things create as much interest in Central Ohio as Ohio State athletics. And this week, the athletic director at Ohio State, Ross Bjork, held a wide-ranging news conference where he talked about how athletes in 4 sports will start receiving direct payments from the university. It's all part of a judge's approval of a landmark NCAA settlement in an antitrust case, which opens the door for schools to pay athletes directly starting July 1st, and Ohio State will be at the forefront of doing that nationwide. Here are the comments of Ohio State Athletic Director Ross Bjork this morning on Columbus Concerns.
So I'm coming up on 1 year on the job, July 1st of last year. You guys all know we had the transition with Gene, and that was a great gift to be able to overlap. You know, this is just a great place. We know what the standard is, we know the expectation, but it's been really awesome just to meet so many people on the journey here. You know, I still feel like I'm calibrating myself a little bit. One, you want to do all the new guy stuff. 2, Ohio State is a big place. It's massive, and we have so many sports and athletes, and then we have all the changes. So between those 3 buckets, I think I'm still getting used to, you know, what's the rhythm? You know, how do I communicate? You know, how do we continue to, you know, soak ourselves in to all of this? It's been a really, really great pleasure to work with our board of trustees. We have a new athletic committee that's been really, really powerful to be able to engage on a really, really frequent basis with our board. And so I want to thank them. President Carter has been amazing, steady hand, lots happening in higher ed, right? And so to be able to have a steady hand, to be able to have somebody who understands athletics, but also can deal with the magnitude of Ohio State, I think has been tremendous. And so it's been great to work with our board and President Carter. I want to thank our staff. Our staff, I mean, this has been hard. We've had to be creative. We've had to adapt. We've had to do some really difficult things that people that got in the business, Jerry, when he got in the business, or whoever it might have been, oh my God, I can't believe we're dealing with this. But no one said, I can't do this. No one said, hey, we're not going to try to do this. So I really want to thank our staff for all of their creativity and adaptability. We work a lot with our legal counsel office, our Office of Legal Affairs, and I want to thank them and Garcia. Tremendous strategy, you know, navigating all of this. So great partnerships across campus. You know, really the way I think about this, what we've done is hard, but it's doable hard. There's a way to do this, and I think we're outlining this the right way. So, look, what I got here, you know, I think the mantra is leave it better than you found it, period. What does that look like? There's a lot to that. That's a high bar, but leave it better than you found it. You know, I think our anchors are best-in-class student-athlete experience and leaders in college athletics. People look to Ohio State. And then from there, you start to roll out, okay, how do we continue to be best-in-class? We have the circle of care that's right out here on the wall. That's a best-in-class model. How do we capitalize? You guys have heard me say this. We're a public trust of the state of Ohio. Everybody owns it, right? Here in the state of Ohio, everybody wants a piece of the Buckeyes. And so how do we nurture that? But how do we grow upon that? How do we really capitalize on it? And so I think in a lot of ways, I believe that there's still potential. And that's kind of hard to do. When you think about the brand of Ohio State, but there are so many elements that we can tap into. So how do we honor that tradition, but also be creative, be innovative? You know, commercialize is a word now, right? But how do we get more donors involved? How do we get more fans buying merchandise? So we're plugging into all those different elements, and we're going to make sure we capitalize on this. And then, of course, you know, what's the right model for Ohio State? How do we be bold? How do we use our voice effectively? People, you know, they look around the room and they want Ohio State to have an opinion, and that's okay. You know, we take that with great responsibility. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing to try to, you know, reflect on vision, but leave it better than we found it, leader in college athletics, and then best-in-class student-athlete experience. A lot of cool things have happened. This is our best academic year ever. Best academic year ever, 3.4 cumulative grade point average. We have a 97% placement rate of our student-athletes this past year. So either they got a job, they're turning pro, or they're going on to some graduate school or some post higher education degree. So you think about that placement rate, 97%. We're still working. The 3% have something in the works, and so I think it'll be close to 100% here pretty soon. 506 academic all Big Ten selections. 36 of our 36 varsity teams had a cumulative GPA for this spring semester. And then 7 programs had a perfect APR score, including national championship football team. The only Division I program that had a perfect APR score, and of course, we won that national championship. We hosted 24 NCAA or conference postseason events, 59 All-Americans, 4 team national championships, 18 conference champions, and then lots of other individual statistics. We're 4th in the Directors' Cup. As we sit here today, we still have baseball and track, so maybe we'll toggle a little bit, but right now we sit here in 4th place after the spring sports that have been reported. And then if you think about what we do in the community, we hosted 3 major events last year in the SHU outside of football. We had a lot of football events, but we hosted 3 major events, right? Our Buckeye Country Superfest music festival for a couple days. We had international soccer, and then we had the stadium series. So 3 massive events. And if you look at all of the events that we had, I want to make sure I get these numbers right. We had 311 events in our venues, from Nationwide Arena to Mershon to Schottenstein Center to the SHU to all the things that we do. And that's a massive imprint on our campus. We had 1,900 events in our athletic facilities, from conferences to games, whatever it might have been. We've sold a record collegiate athletic sponsorship level of $40 million in sponsorship revenue. We're the only program that has that threshold. We had the best fundraising year ever, $80 million. And we have a total economic impact of all the things. If you add all the stuff up between games and concerts and events, over $800 million of economic impact. So really, really fascinating. We've worked on a lot of things. Structure of our department, we announced some things today. New revenue, expense calibration. We're the first athletic program to have a $300 million operating budget. That's not just a one-time event, that's an operating budget. We hired 4 new coaches last summer. We restructured Coach Day's contract for long-term stability. We're doing lots of facility master planning, from Ohio Stadium to the St. John Arena corridor, our athletic district master plan, new hockey arena, the Woody Hayes complex, lots of other smaller projects. We're in the process of remaking our game day atmosphere, so you'll start to see more things about that as we approach the fall. And then I believe in culture over strategy. We've worked a lot on people, just getting to know people, understanding what makes people tick, and how we continue to thrive. So culture over strategy. Yesterday, or earlier this week, Monday, Buckeye Sports Group. I'm sure we have lots of questions about that, but essentially what that does is that brings all the resources that we've had in NIL, and it's been dispersed, right? Collectives, a little bit of Learfield, right? Athletes can get, agreements on their own. This really brings everything under one umbrella. So the foundation, 1870, the people involved in those groups, they want to stay involved. They want to help, and we embrace that. And so they've done a great job, but as we transition with Ohio State Sports Properties, it's really a marketing agency that can go out and arrange agreements between an athlete and a business. And I'll get into some of the house case elements here in a second. If you think about Columbus, 2.2 million people, we have 16 Fortune 1000 companies. We have 50 companies that employ over 1,000 people right here in Columbus. We have a ton of former athletes that live in our community, so we've got built-in connections. So really, really excited about the Buckeye Sports Group and the partnerships that have been created. Today we announced a center. This is not a physical space. This is kind of an umbrella description, so it's not a physical space per se, but we announced a center for sports intelligence and strategy. And it's really a centralized resource. Many people have raced out and hired maybe what people call general managers. So we wanted to take a different approach and say, how do we centralize resources for those coaches that may not have a big staff, but can we provide resources within our department? And so, although, not a physical space, we think it's just a groundbreaking resource that'll have data, it'll have sports science, it'll have sports performance, it'll have a lot of the elements around the circle of care that we use for our student athletes. So we think it's an innovative approach to adapting to this new landscape. So some people are moving positions into this group. And we announced a lot of those things earlier today. So college athletics, when you guys all remember exactly what I said on January 17th, 2024, right? I know Bill does, because Bill writes books. So he remembers these kind of things. But what I talked about was the state of college athletics. And I said, okay, now that I'm here at Ohio State and we've been working on all these things in my previous stops, what happens next? College athletics. I talked about we need a model that intersects sports and academics. So we led with academic performance. Again, go to class, play games. I talked about that. I said we need a model that looks after our individual calendars, transfer portal windows, recruiting calendars, playing schedule calendars. We said we need to chart a new course for the financial arrangement between the athlete and the institution. We have that now, right? We said that we need to sit down with our athletes, and we need to hear from them. That's still a work in progress. What that looks like, we need to continue to work on that. We need to redo NCAA governance. So that's being worked on as we speak as it relates to the House case settlement. And so we talked about a lot of these things about, look, it's time to really just take action. Right, we've been in the courtroom, now we're in Congress, we need some pursuits there, but we laid out all of those things. And so while there is some clarity around the House case, there's still work to be done. There's a hearing today in the House Energy and Commerce, right? And so there's a lot of activity happening. So we still need some work at the federal level. So I'm almost done, just bear with me. So Project 36, so how do we adapt? So we started Project 36 in the fall of 2023. I believe before I got here about, okay, we know House case settlement is coming. How do we do it here at Ohio State? So there was a lot of planning that took place starting in the fall of 2023. So for us, right, and we know what the parameters are, there's $20.5 million of revenue share dollars that can now be given to the athlete. And as part of that, anytime you add a new scholarship in any sport, whether it's 1, 5, or 91 like we did, that has to count against the $20.5 million, up to $2.5. Does everyone follow that? 20.5, $2.5 million of scholarships. We added 91. So therefore, there's $18 million to distribute to our sports, right? And so the scholarship piece, I don't think was widely publicized at the beginning, but anytime we add a scholarship, we have to count it against the cap. And so for us, we will allocate the $18 million starting in 4 sports: women's volleyball, women's basketball, men's basketball, and of course our football program. We really try to use metrics and a formula while also balancing some Title IX approach in this as well. Last year, numbers create narratives, right? We know what we're talking about, right? So Patrick's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. So look, people want to run with numbers, and this is how much this is. The key point in all of this is more opportunity for athletes than ever before, directly from the institution. And so we're not going to get into calculating how much this program gets or that program, but it's 4 sports. It's $18 million cash, and then that'll grow by 4% a year. And then it can also have a look-in period based on new revenues that come into college athletics. So that's how we set it up. Those are the 4 sports that we start with. We hope we can grow that. We hope we can expand. We'll continue to work within that. You will also see College Sports Commission set up. So that got launched on Friday night when Judge Wilkin put out her order at 9:15 p.m. How many had put their phone away like me? I had set my phone away thinking end of June. And here we are making that announcement on a Friday night. But College Sports Commission, they will oversee, this is really a unique distinction, they will oversee the rules of engagement for the House case settlement. The NCAA will oversee rules of engagement that still live with the NCAA. So that's a very clear distinction. I was fortunate or unfortunate to be on the implementation committee on the enforcement subgroup, where we mapped out what should enforcement look like. How will rulemaking apply? How will penalties apply? And so we had an inside look. We wanted practitioners in the room. The Big Ten asked me to do that, and I gladly stepped up. So you're seeing things in the House case: valid business purpose, right? Range of compensation, associated entities. That didn't come from us, right? That came from the House case settlement. So language specific to how this gets rolled out is in the settlement. It's a legally binding settlement. There's a cap management system that'll be with the College Sports Commission. There's NIL Go, which is the clearinghouse. I think I've listened to a few podcasts. I think that's a lot of questions out there about how NIL Go will work. And so you're going to hear all these terms. You're going to hear but that's in the settlement. That's in the settlement. And so never before have we had binding arbitration for student athletes. So that's part of the settlement. And then we just believe that we needed durability. So when all of this came up, what we said was we need durability. We can't be in the courtroom every year. So this House case settlement provides a 10-year window where a federal judge signed off on this agreement. And so we need to all adhere to this. We're going to follow the College Sports Commission and the guidelines that are set forward. But at the end of the day, we still need Congress. We still need to preempt state law. We still need to have a codification around student athletes and how do we categorize them. Students that play sports, not particularly employees. And then we need some thread of legal liability protection that codifies the House case, but also doesn't put us in the courtroom every time there's decisions to be made. So there's a lot. We can talk about college football playoffs. We can talk about transfer portal calendars. We can talk about NCAA governance and all the things that are happening. It's a fascinating time. There's a lot to it. So thanks for bearing with me for 18 minutes on the preamble. Now are you going to monitor this?
Sure.
Jerry? Okay.
To the right, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Rowe.
Yeah, Ross, the last couple of weeks, folks from the SEC have been pretty vocal about what they believe the future of college football and the models of the playoffs should be. Do you think that the Big Ten and some of you guys should start speaking out more on what you guys believe is best for everything? And how do you start going about being more vocal with it?
Yeah, look, here's the decision-making authority rests with the commissioners in the room. And then they bring that to the governing board of the CFP, which is presidents that represent all 10 of the conferences. So to me, debating it in public, I don't think that does any good. I think what we need to do from our perspective is we need to take a step back. We need to keep engaging with our colleagues across. I saw a lot of the SEC ADs this week. We had those conversations. And so, could we be more, vocal about some positioning? Perhaps. But at the same time, there is so much work that has to be done. So look, we believe in what we believe in. We're willing to listen. And I think that's a position that we have to take. But playing it out in public and staking claim, what good does that do? Because one week it was 4-4, 2-2-1, had a lot of traction. That was out publicly. And then the next week it was 5-11. But have we accomplished anything yet? No. So let's play it out where it should be played out in these conversations where the authority lies. And so, look, we're confident in the commissioners. We're confident in Commissioner Petiti. I worked 12 years with Commissioner Sankey. We'll figure this out, but I think we need to all just take a step back and then come back together at the right time to fix it, because we know we can fix it. We just have to come back together.
Far left, Dan Holt, 11 Warriors.
Ross, it's been well publicized that you made a push to get the Ohio State-Texas game moved to Sunday night. Kind of what was that whole process like, and what are you doing to try to get more of those marquee night games going forward?
How much time do we have? Right? It's up to me? Okay. Okay. Is this a podcast? Is this a long-form podcast that we need to go through? Really started the conversation back in the fall, as we were forecasting out and knowing that we had a lot of noon games last year. Just forecasting out, okay, we've got Texas, big-time game. Who knows what would happen? We didn't know what postseason would look like back in November, right? So just mapping out, okay, that's going to be a big game. And look, I think our program, our fans deserve some marquee night games. So we started having that conversation. Texas, in the contract, it goes both ways. They have the ability to approve or not if the game moves off of a Saturday. We asked them I don't blame them. But those conversations started. We worked with Fox. They were understanding. But really, at the end of the day, there's no flexibility in the contracts. Fox bought the noon window. CBS bought the afternoon window. And NBC has the night window. And then the Big Ten Network and Peacock, layer into that. So what we need is more flexibility. Can that happen anytime soon? I don't know. But I think every program should deserve the right to have way more flexibility. We have carried the day for Big Noon. There's no question about it. If you look at the viewership, so we understand why Fox went with Big Noon. We understand why we're picked all the time. But we're hoping just more flexibility. That's what we're looking for. And so, I think Commissioner Petiti is going to work with our TV partners. We're going to continue to have those conversations. But can anything change anytime soon? Probably not, because those contracts are rigid and they're locked in for several years.
You mentioned that Ohio State has carried the day. Do you feel like you guys maybe need to throw your weight around a little more the next time those contract negotiations come up?
I think the question is, what does that mean? What does that mean when you say that? And so I think we can be firm in our positioning. I think we can show data on how we have carried the day. So we have said no to Friday night games. I mean, there's been some things that we have kind of drawn a line in the sand, and that's okay. But I think we need to be thoughtful about, okay, there's going to be a balance. We do have a TV partner with Fox. They're paying us a lot of money. They actually sublicense to CBS and NBC. Right, and so what we're hoping for is that there's a little more collaboration because of that, and so we'll continue to express that.
Far left, Whitney Harding, WCMH.
Hey Ross, one of the questions around the settlement, the revenue share, does bring up Title IX. How do you work that out with a sport with so many players like football to try to even things out? And I've asked you this before, I'll ask it again, does Title IX need an update?
Again, how much time do we have? Look, we have an obligation to follow Title IX in several buckets. Proportionality of student body comparison to our roster comparison, and we're about 50-50. We're really, really close, and we're proud of the work that takes place to get that done. And then you have financial aid allocation, proportionality to your student body. So we meet those two prongs. The revenue share in the NIL world is not subject to Title IX per se, but we do have an obligation to support our female athletes just like we do our male athletes. That's the one great thing about the Buckeye Sports Group is most of the collective work has been male athlete dominated. The Buckeye Sports Group allows us to spread out the attention. So we can promote 100 female athletes and 100 male athletes just the same. Now, the market may dictate different numbers, but from a Title IX standpoint, we think we'll be in a better position to support our female athletes. The back payment, I know there was an appeal yesterday. We'll let that play out. I think they did a lot of analysis on that piece as well. But for us, we know that we used metrics for market-based revenue share allocation. We had a proportion for Title IX, and we think that's a good approach. And then with our Buckeye Sports Group, we'll be able to promote our female athletes like never before.
I have one that's like maybe step 50 while you guys are on step 10 here. International athletes, as far as revenue share goes, because they come here with student visa, that's a work visa.
Right.
How does that work out?
Yeah, we're going through that right now. I know President Baker mentioned some things yesterday in his press gathering at the NACDA convention. It's complicated. We don't want to compromise our international athletes. Obviously, we'll get legal advice on what the right approach is. So it's a little bit of a moving target from that standpoint. The most important thing, protect them and their status, but also is it viable in the market? And those things are being played out right now. Thank you.
24/7 Sports.
Well, yeah. So the 18.5 million.
18.
Okay.
20.5.
20.5.
Minus 2.5.
Okay. 18.
A lot of math.
Will you strictly be the person who says this percentage will go here, or do you have a committee of your top advisors that are helping you figure that out, or how would that look on an annual basis?
A lot of programs raced out and announced, and they really followed the House case settlement allocation, 75, 15, 10. What we did is we used metrics. So we said, okay, what does football drive? What does women's basketball drive? What does volleyball drive? And then we came out knowing we'd have 18 million. What are some metrics that can put some parameters around how to allocate it? So that was a process through a lot of data, a lot of studying that our staff put together. And then at the end of the day, okay, this is where we think football is. So yeah, I signed off on that, was a part of that discussion. And then we'll give those allocations to our coaches, and then they'll have to decide how to divide it up. The other great thing about our scholarship model is in the past, you had a equivalency model. So baseball had 11.7, and they had to divide that up. What we did in this model is we said, okay, baseball, your cash equivalent of 11.7 was this. We're going to add this to your model, and then Coach Hare will have the ability to spread that out as he sees fit. So he will almost have his own sort of scholarship cap within his budget, but he can spend that as he sees fit. And that's the great thing about our intelligence and strategy center, is that we'll be able to provide central resources to all of our coaches. But really, the sports have to decide the revenue share bucket, the scholarship bucket. They're the ones that are accountable to that, and we'll support them centrally with resources.
If I can ask, they're talking about if you want to compete at the national championship level in football, you're going to need about 30 million. If you want to compete at the national championship level in basketball, you're going to need about 10 million. You said 18, so that leaves $22 million that's got to come from outside sources into your department to then give to athletes and to promise to athletes to get them here, to pay the athletes, et cetera. Are you convinced that $22 million of these NIL Go contracts are going to get approved? And when that gets challenged, is that going to withstand court challenge? I mean, what?
Yeah.
What's this look like?
Yeah, do we have a whiteboard in here? Look, here's the thing. It all depends on when. So what you just described is, when does that money get counted? So we have been in an environment the last 4 years, and then when collectives started, that there wasn't necessarily a valid business purpose between a collective and an athlete. It was, look, we have this money, we think you're worth this, here. There wasn't a lot of obligations by the athlete. So those numbers that are being floated have been between June 30th and backwards. So there was a lot of front-loading activity that took place really since January up until June 30th. So when people are throwing out those numbers, you really need to say, okay, when are they counting that? Are they counting that from January 1st of 2025 all the way to June 30th of 2026? Then it might be at that number, because you have the cap that's established and you had the previous NIL environment. Going forward, you will have your cap. Everyone will have the same number. And I would think most of the Autonomy 4, Power 4 programs have a similar distribution model to us, especially when they added scholarships. But anything above and beyond that has to go through the clearinghouse, has to go through NIL Go, has to be approved. And it has to meet, again, valid business purpose. If it's an associated entity, it has to go through the system. And it will meet a range of compensation for a similarly situated individual. I didn't come up with that language. Deloitte didn't come up with that language. The commissioners didn't. That was in the settlement negotiated between the plaintiffs and the defendants. So is it going to be 40 million in the future? Doubtful. Could somebody have a really robust system? We think we can. What is that number? We don't know yet.
And that's Ohio State Athletic Director Ross Bjork going through the complicated measures when it comes to paying athletes under the new provisions. He also talked about the economic impact of Ohio State athletics on the Columbus community, pumping $800 million into our economy each year. I'm Mark News. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening to Columbus Concerns, a public affairs presentation of North American Broadcasting. You can send questions or comments about today's show to Columbus Concerns in care of this station, 1458 Dublin Road, Columbus 43215. Or email us at columbusconcerns@napcomedia.com.
I'm Scarlett Johansson. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater and the arts as a child, which fostered my love for acting. The Feeding America network of food banks helps millions of people put food on the table. You can join the movement to end hunger by donating, volunteering, and advocating. Because when people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.